welcome back to the Wild West for some more story time and a little bit more history about the Wild West. Do you want to know some creepy things that they used to treat medical stuff that we would never do today? In the Wild West, if you had an ailment like a headache, an ailment is symptoms or sickness. It's just another fancy word for it. But if you had a headache, if you had a cold, if you had a cut of some kind that wasn't healing, whatever they deemed necessary, they would put leeches on you and let it suck your blood because they felt like the leeches would get the bad blood out of your body and you would feel better. Most of the time, it did not work. It was just creepy, and they did a lot of funny things back then because, like I said, education wasn't very important, and people just did what their parents did before them and their parents before them, even if it didn't seem to work. Another gross, disgusting thing they did, but actually did work and sometimes still is used today, if somebody had a cut or got hurt really bad and their cut was very deep and it got infected, they would put maggots in it because the maggots would eat all the dead tissue and the infection out of their body and they would get better. That actually did work, and it's still used sometimes today in severe cases for something we call gangrene, which means your skin is dying and it turns black and it smells like moldy cheese. That's what gangrene is. But that was one of the weird, gross tricks that stuck around until today. I just wanted to give you a little tiny bit more of a history about the Wild West. Also, did you know that we all talk, I'm sure you heard your parents talk about gun control or violence in the news. I know that you hear it sometimes, but did you know most little kids carried around guns? We obviously learned that was very bad, but back then they didn't have very good gun control at all, and a lot of people, a lot more than we know of today, got shot. So at least we're improving there, right guys? Also, another thing we learned from this generation and generations before, a lot of kids were drinking beer like their parents, like Minnie's age, because water back then was very, very dirty and they did not have a way to clean it. And something in the beer, mostly yeast, what we used to make bread as well, it took out a lot of things that made us sick. So they had their children drinking beer, which we obviously learned was very, very bad for your body, and why we have a drinking age today. You can't drink before you're 21 because you can't drink that stuff until your body is full grown, and you shouldn't then, kids. It's bad for you in general. But could you imagine sitting with your parents at the dinner table and having beer? You won't like it. It tastes like feet. I'm not kidding. Okay. Today we're reading a story called The True Story of Pocahontas. You know Pocahontas from Disney, right? A lot of that stuff in the movie is actually not true about Pocahontas, but I like the movie better. Like, for example, John Smith and Pocahontas did know each other, that is true, but they were only friends. They never fell in love. Pocahontas actually married somebody else. But in the story, Disney puts out John Smith as the love interest. But we're going to learn a little bit more about Pocahontas. So get a drink, get comfy, and we'll get started. Are you ready for the true story of Pocahontas? Again, I'm going to read it and then I'll show you the pictures because it's very hard to see the words on the screen. And I hope I say all these Native American words right. They're very, very difficult sometimes. Pocahontas is the daughter of the great chief Powhatan. Her name means playful one. So Pocahontas means playful one. She had a very playful, happy spirit. A lot of Native Americans named people on their nature as a person. If they were very funny, they would have a funny name. That means that they were funny. If they were very serious, you would get a name like serious face. Whatever your personality was like was usually how they named you. And you usually didn't get a name until you were much older. Her people are the Powhatans. They live in houses made of saplings, which is like pine trees, little baby trees, branches, sticks, stuff like that. And they pray to their gods. They had many gods, especially the three sisters, what they called the three sisters, which gave them food, shelter, water. Pocahontas has a secret name too. It is Little Snow Feather. So, Pocahontas was mostly called Pocahontas in her life, but with her family, you know how you have a nickname? Like my dad calls me Peanut. Her nickname was the Little Snow Feather. Her father has many wives and more than 100 children. Pocahontas is his favorite. She loves to play with her sisters and brothers. That was very true back then. Like today, there's only one husband and one wife in the family, but back then they used to have the whole village. They would all marry each other and they would all have kids together because they wanted to preserve their species or their culture, and that's how they built their tribes back then. See the pictures up there? A little closer for you. That's Pocahontas playing with all her siblings. That's her dad, the chief Powhatan there. Over here we have Pocahontas. Looks like she's working on the fire here. See that? That's animal skins. The good thing about the Native Americans is when they had to kill an animal to eat, they used every single part of the animal. Nothing went to waste, including the bones. And that's how they honored the spirit of the animal that they took. They were very good about using everything and wasting nothing. When Pocahontas is 10 years old, 3 English ships appear. The Powhatans have never seen anything like them. They call the ships floating islands. What are they doing here? Could you imagine? These are all the Native Americans. They've never even seen a boat. Those are the boats. I'm sure it's the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Those are what Christopher Columbus discovered, what they say the United States, but actually he discovered the Caribbean. They don't teach you that in school. Pay attention. So they just thought they were floating islands because they're very big and they never saw a boat before. They traveled by canoes. Do you know what a canoe is? It's a very small, skinny boat that you row with. So to see a boat like that, I'm sure it did look like a giant island. Men get off the ships. How strange they look. They have hair on their faces. The newcomers wear strange clothes. Pocahontas and her friends giggle. They call the strange people coat-wearing people. Yeah, because look at how they dress. Most Native Americans didn't have beards, but they did grow their hair out long to stay warm. They didn't wear anything but little pieces of cloth to cover their fannies and their front bit. And they didn't have much on their feet. Most of them were barefoot. In the winter, they wore animal skins just over their front. They usually left their legs bare. So they're very tough and they're used to not dressing very much. But look at the newcomers. Look at how they dressed. The weird helmets and the body armor and pants. It probably looked pretty funny, didn't it? You would be like, what the heck? See, that's Pocahontas and her friends giggling because they look so strange. They've never seen anyone like that. They've never seen hats. They've never seen beards. They've never seen armor. These people come from England. These people are probably where I live now. Upstate New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, any area like that. Canada, Alaska. Very wild places. There was no cities or anything. The Englishmen began chopping down trees. They built a fort, a church, and little houses. They called their new town Jamestown, which is actually true. That's the very first town ever built in the United States by non-Native American people. One man points a big stick. Boom, boom! Smoke and fire come out. A bird falls down. Is this magic? Okay, I get it. So they never heard a gunshot. So that boom, boom was a gunshot. And they just I don't know if you can see it very well. See, here he is shooting, and the bird just falls out of the sky, so they think it's magic. They have never seen a gun before. They didn't have gunpowder. None of the Native Americans had any guns. So could you imagine? You've never in your life seen a gun, and then you hear it, probably jump, and then you just see a bird fall out of the sky. You would think that person had magic. But this is the first village they built. This is a lot different than how the Native Americans lived. They fenced in their entire village. Native Americans didn't have fences around. They didn't have roofs on their house and square houses like that and doors and fireplaces like that. Native Americans lived in teepees or longhouses, which looked very, very different. A lot of them were nomads, which we call people who don't build towns like this. They just set up their tents for a few days. Like when you're camping, you set up your campsite, and when you go home, you take it all down. But instead of them going home, they would just go to a new area, set up their teepees and their long houses, and when they felt like moving again, they left their long houses and they would go on. They would bring their teepees with them. They just didn't stay in one place like these villagers did, so it was very, very strange to them. Some Powhatans trade corn to the strangers. They get pretty glass beads, bells, and little mirrors. So, this is true in history. When the people came from England, they didn't know how to grow in this soil. They didn't know what corn or squash or beans were. Nobody in the world had that yet, and they were starving. A lot of these Englishers came here and they starved to death because in the winter months they couldn't find food, they couldn't grow anything. So the natives would help them, and they would bring them corn, and they would bring them squash and green beans, and they taught them how to grow their own food in the soil so that they could survive. Others don't like the strangers. They shoot arrows at them. Soon the Englishmen are afraid to leave their fort. They can't hunt or fish. Their food is almost gone. That's another reason why they couldn't find food. The Native Americans felt like they were coming here to take over. They didn't like that they lived differently in villages. They were scared that they would come and kill their villagers. So the only weapons Native Americans had were bow and arrows. So they would shoot their bows at them and try to make them stay in their village so they couldn't come out and hurt their people or take their food. Not all of them were mean like that. Some did help. Some decided to help, and some were very defensive. It depended on what tribe you were in. Captain John Smith is a leader of the Englishmen. He goes hunting for food, a Powhatan as his guide. Suddenly arrows fly through the air. Captain Smith holds his guide in front of him as a shield. He whips out his pistol, but he stumbles and falls into an icy swamp. There is no escape. The Powhatans pull him out. They rub his freezing legs. Then they take him to Chief Powhatan. So, Pocahontas' father, the Powhatans, were friends of John Smith. They were helping him hunt and helping him stay safe from the other Indians. And a scuffle happened, which we call is a fancy word for a fight, between the tribe that wasn't like the Powhatans, that didn't want John Smith out of his village, and he fell in the icy water, which back then, remember what I said, if you watched the first one, The Littlest Pilgrim, a lot of people went to heaven just from getting a cold. So falling into icy water was very, very bad. And the Native Americans know a lot about being cold. They grew up here, they lived here all their lives, so by rubbing your limbs, it makes them warm again. Like doing this will make your hands warm in the cold. So they tried to keep them, they tried to help them, and so they took them back to Pocahontas' father, Chief Powhatan. A great shout goes up when Captain Smith enters the chief's house. Pocahontas' aunt, Queen Opusakioanaski. That's a really long name. Opusakioanaski. That's her name. Brings him water to wash his hands and a great bunch of feathers to dry them. So the chief, Pocahontas' tribe, some were like the ones that shot arrows and didn't want to help him. Mostly, they did want to help them. They warmed them, they gave them food, tried to make friends here. But do you see the house they're in? You can get up close. That's called the Longhouse. So Chief Powhatan probably stayed in one place, unlike the other tribes that would move around. Probably when it got nice and warm out, they would move again, but they stayed put mostly for the winter months. A lot of them followed buffalo. Buffalo was their biggest food source, and they respected them for their gods. So in the winter, the buffaloes would stay. Well, not all the time they would stay, but they would stay pretty close like they would. So they built places like this, longhouses, to help them stay warm in the winter. But most of them were in teepees. A feast is served. Everyone eats roasted deer meat, bread, corn, and turkey. Then Chief Powhatan gives a signal. Men grab Captain Smith. They push him down and raise their heavy clubs. Okay, so this is a very big fact since Thanksgiving is coming. We would never have a turkey dinner if it wasn't for the natives. We didn't know anything about turkeys or how to eat them or how to defeather them, and turkey became a national holiday or part of our Thanksgiving in honor of the tribes like the Powhatans that helped us survive, helped us teach us how to hunt. Not everybody back then, once Thanksgiving, this is long after this story, once Thanksgiving became a holiday, not everyone ate turkey because only people that live in Native American areas had access to turkey. So, once we learned about the history about the Powhatans helping John Smith and their people, we brought turkey as the honorary dinner to Thanksgiving to honor the tribes like Chief Powhatan that helped John Smith and their people. So, look, they fed him, they tried to get him strong, but remember what I said? Some people in the same tribe wanted to help John Smith and felt it was an opportunity to make friends, and other people wanted to take them out because he left his village and they saw him as a threat. So this is very true of the time. Most tribes fought each other over what to do about the white men, they called them. We'll find out what happens. But suddenly, Pocahontas rushed forward. She runs in front of the warriors and throws her arms around Captain Smith's head. The chief cries out and the warriors fall back. Pocahontas has saved the life of Captain John Smith. So look at Pocahontas being the hero. They were beating him to send him to heaven, and very nasty. They were very mean. They were bullies, doing very bad things. And Pocahontas said, "No, stop it. Don't hurt him. We need him. We want to be his friend. We helped him. You can't hurt him now." So her dad over here said stop because he didn't want Pocahontas to get hurt. So Pocahontas saved his life. She saw an opportunity to change, to make bullies stop being bullies and make friends, which is very beautiful. Pocahontas was very brave. We owe a lot to Pocahontas. Now John Smith and Pocahontas are good friends. She visits him at Jamestown. She helps the hungry English people trade with the Powhatans for corn and meat. Pocahontas races and plays games with the English children. She learns to turn somersaults. It's fun. She turns over and over. Pocahontas wants to talk to her English friends. She uses sign language. When she puts her hand over her heart, it means I am your friend. So, maybe Pocahontas actually is the one that began sign language for deaf people. A little bit, because they had to learn how to talk to each other. Pocahontas spoke a very different language than the English people. So, in order to communicate, she invented her own language using signs. Also, the English people knew how to do somersaults and gymnastics-like things, which they taught Pocahontas how to do that, who went home and showed her friends how to do it. So, basically, they were learning a lot from each other. She taught them how to grow food and survive. They taught her English and how to do gymnastics and how to dress warmer, probably how to sew, stuff like that. So, By Pocahontas sticking up for John and becoming friends, they opened a communication. They learned to trade with each other and help people survive, which is very beautiful. Helped people coexist, which we need a lot more of that today even. We need a lot more Pocahontases. But not all the Powhatans and friends are... Why can't I read, children? But not all the Powhatans are friends with the Englishmen. One day, Captain John Smith is in another fight. He captures 7 Powhatans and takes them to Jamestown. Chief Powhatan sends Pocahontas to ask for his men back. Pocahontas has been a good friend to the English people. Without her help, they may have starved. Captain Smith says, "I will let them go for your sake." So again, the natives and the Englishmen are fighting. They just can't seem to get along. They're each threatened by each other. They want to be able to keep their people alive. And Pocahontas, yet again, is the one that steps up and makes peace between the two. Basically, Pocahontas' friendship with the English was so valuable that it stopped all the fighting. Yet again, she was very brave to do that. One day, Captain Smith and his men go visit Chief Powhatan. The chief is not home. While they wait, Pocahontas and her friends sing and dance for them. When the chief returns, Captain Smith tells him that King James sent him presents. They are waiting in Jamestown. "Bring them here to me," Chief Powhatan says. "I am a king too." Okay, so this is when John Smith probably wrote home to England and told them about the natives and the struggles. And King James wanted to make peace because they wanted to make more settlements here. And they didn't want to go to war with the Native Americans. And in that culture, gift giving was a sign of respect. But the Native Americans wanted the English people to know that they had their own kings. They just called them chiefs. So if you want to respect us, you have to respect that we are in control of our land. So by forcing them to bring the gifts to them was a sign of respect to the natives. King James sent the chief a copper crown, rings for his fingers, a bright red cloak, a basin and pitcher, and a big bed with a canopy. It is hard work to drag the presents through the woods. The chief puts on the red cloak. He sits on the bed. In return, he gives the Englishman his deerskin cloak, his moccasins, and some basket of corn. So it worked. Again, John Smith probably had to show him what this cape was, what a bed was, because they live very differently. So this is, again, the two cultures coming together to honor and give each other gifts and try to become friends. Try to stop the fighting, which is good. Later, Captain Smith goes exploring in his canoe. A spark falls on the gunpowder box he wears around his waist. He bursts into flames. Captain Smith is badly burned. He goes home to England. Oh no. After Captain Smith leaves, the Englishmen and the Powhatans fight more and more often. Okay, so Captain John Smith got very hurt and he had to go back to England to get medical care. So although he just put in all that work to make friends with the chief, their one friend and person they trust left. So now they're back to fighting again. Fighting for territory, fighting for food, wanting the Englishmen to go back where they came from because John wasn't there. They didn't trust them anymore without John. But John had to go home because he was hurt. Samuel Argyle is the captain of an English ship. He makes a plan to capture Pocahontas. That will force her father to make peace. Captain Argyle asks his friend Jopassus to help him. In exchange, he will give Jopassus a copper kettle. Pocahontas is visiting Jopassus and his wife. Jopassus' wife pretends she wants to visit an English ship. Jopassus says she may only go if Pocahontas goes too. Pocahontas does not want to go, but Jopassus' wife cries, so Pocahontas agrees. Oh no. So Pocahontas had traitors in her tribe. They were working with the new chief that replaced John. They wanted to kidnap Pocahontas, which is very bad, which is take her away from her home and hold her for like ransom. So they pretended they wanted to go see the ships and they pretended they were doing something innocent, but really it was to trap Pocahontas. That's not good. Captain Argyle serves them dinner in his cabin. Everyone eats and drinks and smiles. But when the meal is over, the captain says Pocahontas is his prisoner. She is very frightened, but she does not cry. Jopassus and his wife get in their canoe with the copper kettle. They pretend to cry because Pocahontas has been captured. Oh, so even though she's very scared, she's very brave. She had a very stone face, and I feel like she had faith that everything would work out. She wanted peace between her tribe and his people. This man isn't John Smith. She trusted John Smith, and he's being very sneaky to make peace. So then the two traders go home, and they pretend that they had nothing to do with it, and that it was all this man's plan. So they're being bad people to their tribe. No. Captain Argyle sends a message to Chief Powhatan. We have your daughter. We will not give her back unless you make peace and send us some corn. Chief Powhatan wants his daughter, but he is very angry at the Englishmen. He doesn't do what they ask. So instead of being like John and making friends and giving gifts, they took the daughter, and they thought that by doing that they would send food because they were starving. It backfired. Although the chief loved Pocahontas very much, he knew his daughter had great friends in that village and that she was strong and that they wouldn't kill Pocahontas because they wanted peace. They wanted to stay there long term, and they wanted all the fighting to end. So by hurting Pocahontas would make it even worse. They would make the war worse. So they knew that they wouldn't hurt Pocahontas. So he said, no, I will give you no corn. I will not make peace. This is not the way to make peace. Which is very true. You can't kidnap someone and expect peace. Captain Argyle is worried because Pocahontas is so quiet and sad. He tells her she will be treated like a princess. Then he takes her to a house where the people are kind to her. They give her English clothes to wear and new leather shoes. She eats with a knife and spoon. She learns to say grace before she eats. Pocahontas becomes a Christian. She is given a new name, Rebecca. So she wasn't treated badly here. She learned to live like the Englishmen. She changed her clothes, started dressing like them, started eating with silverware, which Native Americans didn't do, started doing her hair like them, lived in long-term houses, learned how to read and write, learned about education, became an Englishman. A young man comes to visit Pocahontas. His name is John Wolfe. John is a tobacco planter. Pocahontas shows him how her people plant tobacco. They talk together. John and Pocahontas like each other very much. He asks her to marry him, and she says yes. The wedding is in a little church in Jamestown. The church is decorated with bright wildflowers. Pocahontas wears a beautiful dress from England. So she did marry someone named John, but it wasn't John Smith. And she was married here in America in that Jamestown village that they built. In an English, very pretty dress, not like her people. But this is showcasing that two worlds are coming together and learning to coexist. Pocahontas is the very first Native American that became an English person, that learned English, learned how to read and write, and showcased that you can get along, you can live together. Although she did dress and act like English people, she didn't forget her native roots and her people. She also educated a lot of people to not fear the Native Americans, that they're not evil savages, that they are good people, that they're hunter and fishermen, and they do good things. So she actually taught both worlds about each other. She was the bridge to peace. Pocahontas and John have a baby. They name him Thomas. They decide to take him to visit England. Chief Powhatan sends his friend Tamako with them. He gives Tamako a stick. Notch the stick, he says, each time you see an Englishman. I want to know how many are there. When the boat lands, Tamako sees thousands of people. He throws away the stick. There are too many to count. So, the chief, still in communication with Pocahontas in some sense, he did still get to see his daughter. he sent a spy to go to England with them, thinking that their tribes are small like their people are. They didn't have anything like this where they live. They didn't know what a city was, and in England it was very built up. They had very big cities with large populations and tall buildings. So when Tamako came, he said, these are too many people. I can't count all these people. I'm not going to have enough room on my stick. So he threw the stick. That just goes to show you the two very different worlds that they're from. The Native Americans are very small communities. And like I said, they don't build up like this because they move around. They follow the animals. They follow their food source. But the Englishmen like to stay in one area and build up, which they tried to do when they came to the Americas. Where is the sky? Where are the trees? At home, Pocahontas could see for miles, but here the air is dark and smoky. The streets are full of tall stone houses. It's hard to find a way between them. People ride around in little houses on wheels. Pocahontas is glad to ride, too. The hard cobblestones hurt her feet. At home, she could walk miles on the soft green earth. So she's talking about the difference here. She's never seen a street. This cobblestone is an early form of street, which obviously is a horse and carriage, and she thought they were houses on wheels because she's never seen a carriage before. So it's like a whole new world for Pocahontas. She couldn't see the trees because she's in the city. It's house after house after house, and the houses are so tall that you can't see the greenery. So she was like, what the heck is going on? This place looks so different. I don't know what to do. A whole new world for Pocahontas. She looks out. There is so much to see. Workmen pull carts loaded with wood and bricks. Women are selling cakes, flowers, and even fish. Buy mine, they shout. Captain John Smith comes to visit Pocahontas. She has not seen him for 8 years. They talk and talk. So she's not used to having food available. She's used to having to grow it and hunt her own. So to see a little market and flowers, she's like, I can just get whatever I need right here. This is nuts. And then her friend, John Smith, comes back because remember, he had to go back to England to heal. And now Pocahontas is in England and their friendship is back. They visit each other. They know each other all their lives now. They're friends. They always stayed friends. Pocahontas goes to many parties. The women dress in silk and satin. Men wear tall hats with curling feathers. They think all Indians are savages, but Pocahontas acts like a princess. She stands very straight. She smiles and speaks softly. How pretty she is. Soon everyone wants to meet Pocahontas. They call her the Indian princess. She is even introduced to Queen Anne. Yeah, so remember how I said the Englishmen were very scared of the natives. They thought that they would kill them and do horrible things. So when Pocahontas comes in all beautiful, they're like, they're not scary people. Those are just tall tales. And she looked like a princess, which is why she became a Disney princess, because there are Native American people today and they deserve to be represented. And Pocahontas was very much a representation of her people because she was the first to come to England, the first to transform into English society, so she was a princess. Her father was a chief, which means king. It's just another fancy word. So yes, Pocahontas was the first Native American princess ever in the world. Again, that's why she became a Disney princess. And she also showed everybody that they had nothing to fear, that they were not savages that were going to hurt them, that they were humble and kind and simple people. And so much so that the queen at the time, Queen Anne, wanted to meet her. I'm sure she heard the rumors and wanted to talk about how her people lived so that they could coexist and continue to grow. And I'm sure Pocahontas taught her a lot. And because of it, peace is known today between they're not killing each other anymore. Pocahontas stayed in England for the rest of her life, but the people of America will always remember her. So she moved to England after that. She never went back to her people, but I feel like she felt she had to stay in England to help protect her people. She was an advocate, which we call a fighter, for her people to make sure they were treated as best as they could and that peace could prevail. So Pocahontas was a very brave woman who went to a whole new world to save her people, was the first to transform. Isn't that amazing? So there you go. That's the true story of Princess Pocahontas. I hope you liked it. Love and light out there, kids. Bye.